The emergency room doors slid open with a soft chime, and in walked something no medical staff had been trained to face. Not a man bleeding, not a mother in labor, but a lion, a white lion, soaked from the storm, padding silently on tile. He didn't roar, he didn't growl, he carried a child in his jaws, wrapped in an old blue flannel, and somehow nobody moved, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, as if the world itself had gone still to let this creature pass. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Juneau, Alaska, was a land suspended in cold and silence during winter. On this particular night, the snow had turned relentless, blanketing everything in sight with thick layers of white. The wind howled like a chorus of spirits through the pine trees, rattling windows and flattening what few footsteps were left on the frozen ground. Streetlights glowed dim through the misty air, casting halos of golden fog. It was a night meant for staying indoors, for warmth and fire, not for surprises. Claire Thompson, 36, was not a woman easily startled. She had been the sole veterinarian in the region for nearly 10 years, known for her cool head and capable hands, standing tall at 5'10". With a long frame wrapped in a fleece-lined coat, she was built for the rigors of mountain life. Her dark auburn hair, always tied back in a no-nonsense bun, revealed sharp cheekbones and a pale, weather-worn face. Claire's slate-gray eyes rarely betrayed emotion, but they had seen enough loss to know what it looked like, even in animals. She worked alone tonight, as always. Her clinic, a 2-room log structure tucked at the base of Mount Roberts, was more refuge than business most nights. It housed the occasional injured husky, frostbitten barn cat, or snowblind owl on this night. It was still. Quiet, save for the hum of the heater and the scratch of her pen across paper. The storm outside thickened. Claire sipped lukewarm tea and glanced at the clock. Midnight. She leaned back in her chair behind the counter, eyes briefly closing. A long day, a longer week. She considered turning off the porch light. Just as the motion sensor clicked, she opened her eyes. The light had been triggered. Claire stood slowly and stepped toward the front window, pulling aside the frost-lined curtain, and then she froze. There was something out there, not a dog, not a bear, something larger. She unlocked the door and eased it open just a crack. The cold slapped her face instantly. Snow swirled in eddies across the porch, and in the center of that swirling white stood a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. A lion, but not the kind one might glimpse on television or in far-off savannas. This one was white, impossibly white, from mane to tail. Its fur shimmered under the porch light, soaked through from the falling snow. It stood tall and still, massive paws rooted to the porch, as if it had emerged from some ancient dream. Its amber eyes met hers and held. Claire's breath caught. She gripped the doorknob tighter, heart pounding, but the creature made no move. It did not growl, or bare its teeth, or lower into a crouch. It simply stood, composed and silent, its mouth gently holding a bundle wrapped in flannel. The lion lowered its head slightly and placed the bundle on the wooden planks of the porch, just inside the glow of the light. Then it lifted its head again and sat down. Its eyes never left hers. Claire couldn't move. The cold, the disbelief, the surreal nature of the moment rooted her to the threshold. Then the bundle stirred. A tiny, breathless sound broke the stillness. A whimper. Claire's eyes dropped to the flannel. It was soaked and sagging, but unmistakable. A baby. She could see the faint movement of a small chest rising and falling beneath the fabric. She stepped outside. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she knelt carefully and reached for the bundle. The lion didn't flinch. As her fingers touched the fabric, the baby let out a pitiful, shallow cry. It was a newborn, and it was freezing. Claire gathered the bundle into her arms, moving with purpose now. She backed slowly toward the open door. The lion continued to sit there, watching, motionless, breath steaming in the cold air. She paused in the doorway. Baby clutched to her chest. "What are you?" she whispered, though she knew there'd be no reply. The lion blinked once, slowly. Claire stepped inside and closed the door, behind the glass, through the frost-lined pane. She saw the lion remain seated, silent, still, like a statue carved from snow. It did not leave, it only watched, like a guardian waiting for a signal that its task was done. The storm had eased by morning, leaving behind a quiet so dense it pressed against the clinic's windows. Claire Thompson stood by the emergency heating lamp, cradling the infant in her arms, her breath visible in the cold air. The child, a boy, perhaps only a few days old, now lay bundled in a thick woolen blanket, his cheeks regaining a hint of color. The flannel the lion had delivered him in was drying by the heater, soaked and stained by the wild night. Claire had cleaned and checked him thoroughly. He had no injuries, only signs of hypothermia and mild dehydration. Now, with the boy sleeping in the warmth of the clinic's recovery corner, Claire finally let herself exhale. Her hands still trembled from adrenaline, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. She had dealt with wolves, injured moose, even a black bear once caught in a wire trap, but nothing in her career or her quiet. Science-bound life had prepared her for a white lion delivering a newborn child at midnight. She sat at her desk and unfolded the blanket once more, methodically checking for any sign, any name, in a small inner fold, damp but intact. She found 2 items, a photograph and a silver locket. The photograph was faded, but clear enough. A young woman, blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, stood smiling gently, her arms wrapped around a bundled infant, presumably the very boy now sleeping across the room. The woman had kind eyes, a soft sadness behind her smile. The locket, tarnished but elegant, bore a simple inscription on the back. "To Emily. Always protect him." Claire held the locket between her fingers, thoughts tightening around the name. Emily, so that was the mother's name. There was no last name, no address, no contact. She picked up her satellite phone and called the local authorities. A quiet-voiced dispatcher at the Juneau Sheriff's Office named Reggie answered. Reggie was in his 50s. Slow-speaking, dependable. A former logger who'd taken up dispatch work after a chainsaw accident cost him 2 fingers on his left hand. Claire explained what had happened with measured words, leaving out the part about the lion for now. "There's a baby?" Reggie asked, incredulous. "Yes. Alive. Roughly 3 days old, no sign of the mother, no vehicle nearby, just the child. I'll notify Sheriff Grayson." Reggie said he's already flagged a missing person, a woman named Emily Parker and her infant son, last seen 2 days ago near Glacier Road. That could be her. Claire's breath caught. Emily Parker. That's right, park ranger. Her car was found wrecked just off the pass. Snowfall made search and rescue impossible. We've got a chopper grounded till noon. Claire hung up and looked at the child, now softly sucking on his thumb. "Eli," she whispered. Deciding in that moment, Emily's boy had a name now. Eli Parker. Far from town, in a log cabin nestled at the edge of a snow-covered forest. 14-year-old Noah Jenkins stood on the porch, hands buried deep in a tattered fleece hoodie 2 sizes too large. He was lanky, sharp-faced, with thick black hair that never stayed combed. His eyes, deep brown, constantly alert, missed nothing. Noah had been raised by his grandfather, Thomas Jenkins. After losing his parents in a cabin fire when he was 6, the trauma had turned him inward, made him watchful and stubborn. A boy more comfortable tracking birds than talking to kids his age, Thomas, now in his 70s, was a wiry man with a deep-set scowl and a limp from an old trapping accident. His cabin had no internet, no satellite TV, only a crackling radio, hunting gear, and an impressive collection of preserved pelts. Yet, despite his gruffness, he had always spoken gently to Noah, especially when telling stories. This morning, Noah spotted the tracks. They were large, impossibly large, imprints in the snow that curved behind the barn and led into the deeper woods. Not bear, not cougar. These were feline. Yes, but wider, longer, and perfectly spaced. Each pad sunk deeper than the next, like the animal moved with weight and purpose. Noah had tracked wolves and lynx before, but this was unlike anything he had seen. He rushed inside, cheeks flushed. "Gramps." He called, "Come look." Thomas followed, adjusting his heavy coat. He bent over the tracks, then stood up slowly, a strange tension in his face. "You know what made those?" Noah asked. Thomas didn't answer immediately. He gazed into the trees for a long moment before saying, "Used to be stories. From the folks up at North Hollow, the wildlife center," Noah asked. Thomas nodded. "Shut down years ago. But before that, back when I was younger, there was a white lion they brought in. From some rescue down south. Said it had been raised by hand. Smart thing. Gentle. Damn near acted like a person. Some claimed," Noah raised an eyebrow. "You believe that—" Thomas shrugged. "Didn't then, but those tracks might just change my mind." Noah's curiosity was already flaring. Where was the center again? Other side of Harlow Ridge, 2 miles through the trees. Thomas narrowed his eyes at his grandson. "Don't even think about it." Noah smirked. "Didn't say I was, but he was." By early afternoon, Claire received a second call from Reggie. "Helicopter's taking off now. Sheriff Grayson's headed your way to pick up the child. We'll bring him to Memorial Hospital in town. You said no sign of the mother?" "None," Claire said, but she hesitated. Then she added, "There was something else. Something you're going to think is impossible." She explained, not embellishing, not dramatizing, just the facts: the lion, the baby, the eyes that didn't threaten, the quiet exit. There was a pause. "I'll let Grayson know," Reggie finally replied, voice unreadable. "We'll be there in an hour." Claire hung up, staring once more at the woods beyond the frosted windows. Whatever the truth was, she was sure of one thing. That lion hadn't been wild in the way the word usually meant. It had been purposeful, intelligent, like it knew exactly what it was doing and exactly who it was bringing the child to. Out in the trees beyond the town, Noah laced up his boots and stuffed a compass into his coat. The tracks were fresh again, leading straight into the northern grove. He looked back once at the cabin, then stepped into the deepening snow, heart pounding. He didn't know what he'd find, but he believed now, more than ever, that something old, something half-forgotten, had returned to these woods, and he intended to find it. Claire Thompson stood at the window of the clinic, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the fading trail that disappeared into the trees. The snow had stopped falling, but the chill in the air clung to the earth like a secret that refused to melt. Inside the building, the warmth hummed around her. The soft coos of infant Eli drifting from the insulated bassinet beside the heater. The boy was stronger today, color in his cheeks, breath steady, but the questions weighed heavier than ever. Across the room, Sheriff Lucas Grayson leaned against the counter, notepad in hand, pen tapping lightly against his chin. In his mid-40s, Lucas had the kind of presence that made people listen, not from fear, but from calm authority. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and a weathered face that held the lines of long winters and longer nights. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and thoughtful. "So, you're telling me," he said, "a white lion, walked 20 kilometers through forest and frozen ridge, in a snowstorm, carrying a newborn child, and laid him at your doorstep." Claire turned from the window. "I know how it sounds." Lucas studied her, not judging, just waiting. "I left out that part when I first called because I didn't think you'd believe me. I wouldn't have believed me, but I saw it. I saw its eyes. It wasn't just acting on instinct. Lucas, it knew what it was doing." Lucas didn't laugh. Instead, he flipped a page back in his notebook. "Emily Parker," he said, more to himself than to her, last seen 3 days ago, driving home with her son after checking storm shelters near Harlow Ridge. Vehicle found overturned near Pine Creek Trailhead. No sign of bodies, no footprints, just snow. Claire nodded. "I think she's alive." Lucas looked up, surprised. "That's a strong assumption." "I found this," Claire said, and handed him the photograph and the silver locket. Lucas examined the items carefully. Definitely her. He murmured, "We confirmed her husband's name, too. Michael Parker, died 2 years ago in a hiking accident. She raised Eli on her own, worked part-time for the Park Service, volunteered with local wildlife rescues." Claire hesitated. Then, "Do you remember North Hollow?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That old wildlife center." "It's more than just old," Claire said. "It's where I first met Emily. We were 16. Volunteering there changed her. Changed me, too." Lucas folded his arms. Go on." "She had this connection to animals," Claire continued. "Especially one, a lion. White. Unusual even then. They called him Snowpaw because of the way he walked. Silent. Like he floated. He was brought in from a failed exotic animal rescue down south. Had a wound on his hind leg. Wouldn't let anyone near him. Emily, though, he trusted her." Lucas looked unconvinced, but curious. She would spend hours with him, talk to him, hum to him, and she trained him, too. Not tricks, just simple commands, voice and whistle signals. It was like he understood more than anyone expected. "And you think this lion," Lucas pointed vaguely toward the woods, "is that same one?" After all these years, Claire didn't answer at first. Then she said, "It's not just belief. Lucas, it's memory. When I looked into his eyes last night, I remembered those afternoons at the center, the sound of Emily's whistle, the way Snowpaw would sit beside her, like a guardian." Lucas rubbed a hand over his chin. "That was over 15 years ago, I know," Claire said quietly. "But lions can live long lives, especially those raised in captivity. And if he was released into the wild, if he stayed in these forests—" Lucas sighed. "It's far-fetched, but not impossible." Claire stepped closer, voice firm. "What's more far-fetched that a wild lion would carry a baby 20 kilometers and drop him off safely, or that a lion trained by Emily, one that loved her, heard her call and responded." Lucas didn't reply. Outside, The trees swayed softly under the early afternoon light. Meanwhile, farther north, Noah Jenkins pushed through the thigh-deep snow, following the strange tracks he'd been tailing since early morning. The boy's scarf was frozen stiff against his mouth, and his boots were soaked through. But adrenaline kept him moving. He had seen the prints again, and this time they weren't alone, beside the lion's tracks. He found something else, a human boot print, smaller than his own, likely a woman's. Noah paused, heart hammering. He knelt and examined the indentation, protected from wind by a cluster of spruce. The print was fresh, no more than a few hours old. Emily, he thought. She's alive. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a worn field notebook, the one his grandfather had given him. Inside was a map of the region, hand-drawn and smudged with age. He circled his current position with a pencil, then marked the direction of the prints. He didn't plan to stop. Back at the clinic, Lucas received a radio call from Reggie. Static crackled. Then the dispatcher's voice came through. "Grayson, we've got an update. Rescue team from Sitka found a torn piece of cloth near the edge of Pine Creek's ravine. Matches the description of Emily's jacket. There's a narrow cave nearby. They're prepping to descend." Lucas stood straighter. "Any sign of movement?" "Not yet, but the dogs are picking up scent." Lucas clicked the radio off and looked at Claire. She might still be alive. Claire swallowed. Then Snowpaw really did hear her. Lucas nodded slowly. "Let's say you're right. If this lion is connected to her, if it came back because of some bond, then it might be leading us to her," Claire said. Finishing the thought, the sun dipped low over the tree line, washing the forest in a copper hue. A hush had fallen over the recovery base hastily set up at the foot of Raven's Spine Ridge, the area where Snowpaw had last been seen, and where the trail had gone cold. The ridge's slope, now cordoned off with bright orange flags, was being scanned by drones and rescue personnel. But the white lion had vanished. Claire stood by a folding table stacked with field maps and radios, her jaw tight, arms crossed over her chest. Eli sat nearby in the arms of a young volunteer named Rebecca, a quiet, freckled woman in her mid-20s with a calming presence and a thick Maine accent, brought in by the State Wildlife Coordination Team. She gently rocked the boy as he dozed, completely unaware of the storm his presence had ignited. Claire hadn't spoken much since the fall. Not out of grief. Not yet. But focus. She refused to believe that Snowpaw, the creature who had defied every instinct to protect, was simply gone. Something in her gut, something unscientific and unshakable, told her there was still more to come. The wind picked up, brushing strands of her hair into her face. She glanced toward the path leading deeper into the trees, where a familiar shape was now emerging. Noah Jenkins appeared between the branches, cheeks flushed, backpack strapped tight, with his grandfather's old field notebook sticking out the side. Behind him was a member of the Juneau Search and Rescue Team, Corporal Tanya Ellsworth, a lean, no-nonsense woman in her late 30s, with sun-darkened skin, a deep dimple in her chin, and an expression that rarely betrayed emotion. She had served in the Alaskan Guard before joining SR and moved with the precision of someone used to emergencies. Her long strides kept up with Noah easily, though it was clear from the mud on his boots and burrs on his coat that he had been running ahead the entire time. "I found it," Noah called out before reaching them. "The car. It's off the old game trail, just like the map showed, wrecked, covered in brush, but still intact." Claire's heart jumped. Anyone there? Noah shook his head, not in the car, But about 200 yards further in, there's a clearing, and then a drop into a narrow ravine. That's where I saw her. His voice faltered slightly. She's alive. Before Claire could react, Tanya stepped forward. She's weak, dehydrated, and favoring her right leg, likely a fracture, but she's lucid, kept asking about her son. Tanya's voice, usually clipped, had softened slightly. She also kept saying the same name, over and over. Claire whispered, Snowpaw. Tanya nodded once. Within minutes, a rescue team assembled. They moved fast but cautiously, carrying stretchers and field kits. Claire insisted on going with them. Tanya agreed, on the condition that Claire stayed behind the medics. Noah, despite being ordered to rest, trailed them at a distance. He didn't want to miss what came next. The forest deepened as they moved northward, the trees growing closer together, the trail narrow and slick, birds overhead scattered with each step, and then, just as Noah had described, the trees broke open into a clearing that sloped down into a narrow ravine, surrounded by frozen moss and ferns. She was there, Emily Parker. Her figure was half reclined against a fallen log, wrapped in torn layers of thermal wear and a faded park ranger coat. Her blonde hair was tangled, streaked with dirt and pine needles, but her eyes, clear and blue, tired yet alive, lit up the moment she saw Claire among the rescuers. Claire dropped to her knees beside her. Emily tried to sit up, wincing as she moved her leg. "You have him," she rasped. Claire nodded. "Eli's safe. He's okay. He made it." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "Snowpaw," she murmured, voice breaking. "He heard me." Claire took her hand gently. "Tell me what happened." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a trembling breath. The car slid off the trail. I couldn't stop it. I shielded Eli as best I could when we stopped. I knew we were off the grid. I wrapped him in the emergency blanket. I had to try something. So I pulled out that old chime whistle. She gestured to a small cord around her neck. Now broken. It was the same one I used with Snowpaw back at North Hollow. I didn't even know if he was still alive, but I blew it. One long note, the one he always came to. The wind shifted. I passed out. When I woke up, he was gone. So was Eli. Claire could barely speak. He brought him to me, to the clinic, carried him in his mouth through the storm. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, her body shaking from behind. One of the medics called out, "We've got vitals. Stable. But she needs fluids and splinting before we move her." Claire looked back at Tanya. The corporal nodded and motioned for her team to prepare the stretcher, as they gently lifted Emily. She turned her head toward Claire once more. He remembered. She whispered, "After all those years." Claire didn't say anything. She simply squeezed her hand. They were halfway back when a sound stopped them. Soft but sharp, echoing through the trees, a whistle, faint, distant. All heads turned. Noah stepped toward the ridge's edge, eyes narrowing. I heard it again. He said. Claire scanned the tree line. The shadows moved, leaves trembled, and then, just beyond the last line of trees, a figure appeared, white, limping, regal even in pain, Snowpaw. He stood tall, despite the wounds on his flank and the blood crusting his shoulder. His eyes met Emily's from a distance, and she raised a hand toward him, tears falling freely now. Snowpaw dipped his head once, a gesture so gentle it was almost human, and turned, disappearing into the brush with the grace of something half real. The lion had heard the call, and now, having fulfilled the promise, he was gone. The snow was beginning to melt in Juneau. It clung only to the deepest forest beds and the north faces of mountains, hiding in pockets and shadows, reluctant to release the final notes of winter. In the heart of this quiet thaw, something stirred, not just in the land, but in the people. News of the white lion had swept through Alaska like wildfire. It began with whispers among search and rescue teams, spread to hospital corridors, and finally spilled into the news cycles of regional broadcasters. A lion, white as the mountain snow, once thought to be legend, had appeared not once, but twice, to save the life of a child and his mother. Photographs taken from festival-goers' phones showed the blurred, unmistakable shape of the creature leaping through the crowd, shielding a boy, vanishing into mist. No one had tried to chase him. No one had needed to now. A week after Emily and Eli were reunited. Claire stood at the edge of a property long forgotten by most. The wooden arch above the trail read North Hollow Wildlife Refuge. The letters faded, the sign hanging crooked. The old buildings had been swallowed by trees and time. Vines climbed rotting walls, and shutters flapped loosely in the wind. But the land still breathed, and Claire felt it in her chest, like an ember stirring back to flame. Emily stood beside her, leaning on a cane. She was thinner now, her blonde hair cropped short after the hospital stay, and she moved with the tentative caution of someone learning to trust her body again. But her gaze was strong. She had faced the storm, she had survived, and she was home. "I never thought I'd see this place again," Emily whispered. Claire gave a half smile. "We're not just seeing it, we're bringing it back, behind them." Volunteers were unloading wood, fencing, and veterinary equipment from a convoy of trucks. A new sign lay propped against a stump, freshly carved by a local artist. North Hollow Wildlife Sanctuary, reborn beneath it, etched in silver, where promises walk on silent pause. In the distance, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, where do I put the solar panels?" Noah Jenkins came jogging into view, his shaggy black hair now trimmed neatly, wearing a red volunteer vest far too big for his lean frame. He had grown in more than just appearance. There was a steadiness to his step, a pride in his posture, no longer just the curious boy trailing lion tracks in the woods. He had become something else, a keeper of stories, a future guardian of this place. Claire waved him over. "Storage shed, west wing." He gave a mock salute and veered off. Later that afternoon, the wind calmed, and the air turned golden under the light of the setting sun. Emily sat on the porch of the newly cleaned admin building. Eli curled against her, asleep in her lap. The boy had not stopped smiling since they had returned. He still carried the wooden lion Claire had given him. Now, worn smooth from his small fingers, Claire joined them. Handing Emily a mug of tea, they sat in silence for a while, listening to birds and the distant clatter of hammers. Then Emily spoke, softly. "You really think he'll come back?" Claire looked into the trees. "I don't know. I don't think it's about coming back. He was never really ours." "Emily, but he remembered this place. He remembered you. That means something." Emily nodded, gazing into the tree line, where dusk now painted the forest in blues and grays. At dawn the next day, the mist clung low to the ground. Frost sparkled across the field, catching the early light like shards of glass. It was quiet. No tools, no footsteps, just breath and trees. Noah was the first to see him. He had come early, hoping to photograph the deer herd that sometimes grazed near the outer fences. But what he found instead stopped him in his tracks. Snowpaw, standing at the edge of the woods, his coat streaked with time, mane dancing gently in the breeze. Was the lion of memory and myth? He made no sound, no movement to approach, his eyes, deep amber and old beyond words, fixed on something far away. Emily stepped outside, guided by instinct alone. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just walked to the edge of the clearing. Eli in her arms. The boy looked toward the trees and pointed. "Mama," he said softly. "It's the big kitty." Emily knelt slowly, lowering Eli to the grass. Snowpaw looked at them, just for a moment. Then he dipped his head. One slow, final gesture, and turned. He disappeared between the trees without a sound. No one followed, no one called. They simply watched because they understood. The promise had been kept, and some hearts, no matter how tamed, were born to return to the wild.